What did we learn yesterday? Oh, come on now, Jen. I wouldn't get that extreme. I'm not even gonna say what you put in the chat. We learned about the push method on an array. What did we need to push into the array? Well, we were generating all of these individual seats, right? And what we wanted to say is once we make that seat, once we make that object, take that object and push it into the end of the array, basically just add it on to the end. And that's really helpful whenever, because most of the time when we're keeping track of an array, chances are whatever the new thing that we have, we do want to throw it onto the end. And so that push method is definitely helpful. We learned about the template literal, and that template literal is when we use the backticks. That is just like a string, and according to JavaScript, it looks like just a string, but really what it allows us to do is to avoid string concatenation by being able to just drop in those variable values using our $ curly braces. We also got into our indices, right? Our indexes, our columns, and our rows. And we got into that because we couldn't just do a for of loop and say, hey, go loop over each one of these seats because the seats hadn't been created yet. So instead of having to copy and paste a bunch of our HTML to get our seats to show up, instead what we were able to do was have that for loop not only run 8 times, but each 8 times that it ran another 8 times in order to generate out each one of those columns and then each one of those rows, and then finally for each one of those movies. So a lot going on there. Ali mentioned that we got our dot notation and we also are using our bracket notation as well, right? We are intermixing those. Our bracket notation we're using with indexes or when we are getting a variable or a dynamic key out from our objects, we were using the dynamic key of, hey, what movie is selected? That's the movie of the data that we're trying to work on. And then we also saw dot notation to say, no, I'm just trying to get the seats. I'm not looking for a variable called seats. The key itself is called seats. That's what we're trying to get out. We also saw how to add a class, right? When we were generating out our HTML and we wanted to say, hey, if this seat is selected or not selected, add in this class, and that's how we turn that seat blue. Yes, Natasha, seeing objects and arrays and objects and seeing kind of how that builds out, right? And how we started with this very simple looking, oh, we just need to keep track of the price and we just have these 4 movies. And before we realize that we're all the way in and we've got, if you think about it, the movie is an object. Then we go into the seats, which is an array. That seats array has an array of arrays in it to keep track of all of the columns. And inside of that array of arrays, we have an object. So we're going an object, an array, and an object deep. And you're like, well, why do we need all of that? Well, when you think about it, oh, we need to keep track of each one of these rows separately. So each one of those rows makes sense to be its own array. And then we're like, all right, but we need to keep track of whether or not the seat was selected and whether or not the seat was already taken or not. And that seems like an object because we've got a lot of things that we got to keep track of in there. So lots of layers that we're peeling, right? It's like maybe we take it past the onion analogy and we get to turducken level, right? Because we're working on the turkey and we're peeling back the turkey, and then all of a sudden we're going to hit another level of an array, and that's when we get down to the duck, right? And so sometimes we get that change up, and that's what we got to work on when we're using that notation and really diving in is, hey, am I on an array right now, at which point I need to use those square brackets and the indices, or oh, am I on an object where I need to use a key? So lots going on there.
I get
We
really
are
nervous deleting code and changing things, but Nate kind of got me out of that comfort zone with the GitHub repository. He's like, you can delete that. We already have it. No need to keep it around. And then you did that yesterday, I think, with some divs maybe. We got some
yes.
things going on. You're like, we don't need these anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean we don't need those anymore?
Well,
So
then
yeah,
you
that's
are
nice to see
going
the
to love
progression.
today, because today we are all about drying our code out, right? That DRY, don't
Yes.
repeat yourself. We're going to be going in
Okay.
and we're going to realize that there are parts of our code that we can refactor, that we can do a little bit better. There are going to be some things that we want to clean up the comments. We want to keep on going on that. So
Awesome.
one of the concepts is they call it clean code, and clean code is just saying, hey, is this clean so that the computer can understand this, but is this clean enough so that if another developer came in and started reading your code, would they feel dirty, would they feel a little out of place, right? So clean code is not like there's not a handbook, there's no like manual that I can give you for all of the rules of clean code, but there are certainly times like as soon as we put all of those divs in on Monday or on Tuesday, right? I forget who it was, but someone said, really, there's no better way to do that? And I'm like, well, there is, but we want to understand building it out first and getting that interface to show up. And then, because once we have that interface showing up, it's a little bit easier to understand that for loop, right? And understanding how that's generating out. So refactoring code is definitely an important step, and one that you can always go back, and Doug will attest to this. The second that you finish a refactor, you now want to go back in and refactor your refactor, because as you were refactoring, you found other things that you wanted to refactor in the first place. So code is never done, and there's always another way to either make it cleaner or find another feature that's going to make it a little bit better.
Awesome. Thanks.
Anything else from yesterday? Do we have any questions? Pop open your code, give it a quick review, and say, hey, do we have any questions? Are there any concepts? Did I read that number 23 comment and really not get what that comment was trying to describe in the code? I just picked 23. I have no idea what 23 is. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to get my code set up here. I'm going to close out of whatever I've got open. I am going to head to my code folder, and I'm going to say this so it's part of the recording to avoid confusion. I screwed up on Tuesday, and I named my Tuesday folder day 1 instead of day 2. I have since corrected that. So if you guys are looking at your code and you're like, where the hell did the day 3 folder come from? I only have day 1 and day 2. I renamed day 1 to day 2 and day 2 to day 3. So it aligns with the videos. So today, being Thursday, will officially be day 4. If you want to rename your folders, you can. If you want to just stick with it, that's totally fine. But from an organizational sake, in case you haven't noticed, I might be a little bit OCD with my organization. So I had to fix that on my own, but I just wanted to mention that. Do not panic if you're like, wait, where did day 1 go? We were off for Memorial Day on day 1. So I'm going to take my day 3 and go ahead and duplicate that. And this is going to be day 4. And I'm sure you guys will be glad to hear this is our last day of the project. So once we finish up movie theater, we start on Monday with a blog. So on Monday, we're going to make a blog from scratch. We're going to learn about not only using our arrays and our objects to keep track of our blog posts, we're going to get into some real CRUD: create, read, update, and delete. And that's going to line us up for the 4 operations we not only want to design into any interface that we're storing data with, which will be really helpful for when we get to the database. We're going to get a little bit more JavaScript practice without going too deep into algorithms and stuff like that. So this is going to be a little bit lighter of a project. I don't think it's personally as hard as the movie theater project, but we are going to see for the first time, how do we work with multiple pages worth of data, right? How do we get our JavaScript working on different on different pages and thinking through the interface? We may even wireframe it out a little bit so we know kind of what we're trying to build. And then after that, we are going to tackle a project that we have not done in the curriculum before, and that's going to be an algorithm-based project. So that's where we're going to start mainly trying to get you prepped for a technical whiteboarding interview, right? Oftentimes in whiteboarding interviews, they're going to give you a bunch of data and they're going to ask you to solve some set of it, right? So if you want to think back to, hey, find the average for all of the teachers. Well, that data was just given to you, right? And you kind of had to work your way around it and practice and think through it that way. So we are, once we finish up the blog project, we're going to switch over to algorithms, and we're going to see how we can use JavaScript to solve problems on data sets that would be way too large for us to solve by hand. And the goal there is really to get you set up for whiteboarding interviews, technical interviews, that kind of stuff. And then we will finish up our JavaScript with a JavaScript review. So I'm going to go through all of these basic JavaScript principles, starting from variables and concatenation and working all the way up to for loops and functions and all of that stuff. So that's a Google form that you guys will fill out on your own. It does not impact your final grade at all. So it really is not a problem for you to admit, like, hey, you just went over this and I still have no idea how concatenation works or what it's doing. I'm going to put a 1 on that. Or you're going to go through it and go, oh, you know what? I didn't think I knew how functions work. And then you just did a little demo and I'm realizing we did functions for the on click and we also did a function for the on change. And oh, you know what? Maybe I do get those functions a little bit more than I thought. So we're going to wrap up our module with that. And once we get all of that data in, I'm going to basically come up with a project on the fly that's going to tackle where you guys scored yourselves collectively low. And so that will be a good opportunity to say, like, hey, let's just come up with a project together. It's going to be pretty similar to when you threw YouTube at me, right? And you were like, hey, I want to see how you would go about making YouTube. Same thing with all of these concepts. We're going to take all of those concepts out. I'm going to take about 5 minutes to gather up all of that data, and we're just going to make a project together from scratch. And that will be our final review. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. JavaScript blog, easing up a little bit, but really want to stress that this weekend, I do not have homework for you. So your homework for this weekend is to practice getting to that level of understanding. What are we trying to do? How did we tell the JavaScript to do that? And why is the computer making that work? How is the computer really processing that through, right? That's your, what did we try to do? How did we do it? And why did the computer understand it the way it did? Or if you want to get that other way of thinking in your head, it's the, can I see someone do that concept and understand it? Can I do that concept on my own? And can I teach this concept to someone else? Can I explain to someone else what this code is doing? No, you don't have to teach it to the level of going to another beginner. But if someone came along and said, hey, I don't really know JavaScript, can you tell me what these 5 lines of code are doing? You could take a pretty good stab at it and say, all right, well, maybe we don't need to explain how the loop runs all 8 times, but I can roughly tell you that this is a loop that's going to run 8 times, and we need it to run 8 times because we need 8 rows of seats. That's the level that we kind of want to be able to get ourselves to. So your homework for this weekend will be a 5-question quiz that I have not posted yet. I will make sure to get that posted during class. There's one question that I haven't covered yet that I need to pop out of there. So your quiz, which will be due Sunday, 11:59, 5 questions, just like all of our other quizzes. Mostly multiple choice in this week's quiz. And then the second one will be, hey, I'm not going to take this weekend off just because I don't have homework. I really want to go back and either one, dive in so that we've got that level of understanding for our movie project, or two, say, I got a little bit of free time because I don't have a required homework project this weekend. Maybe I'm going to head to Free Code Camp. Maybe I'm going to start setting myself up for the self-assessment and go, what concepts am I not getting? Let me go see if I can go to Free Code Camp, and maybe they're going to explain it in a way that's a little bit different, a little bit better than the way Max explained it. Maybe, and I've been hearing this a lot, all I need is a little bit more practice with that. And that's where Free Code Camp is really great, because it's all bite-sized, right? So you can look at their entire project list, their entire exercise list, and go, you know what? No, I got string concatenation. I can skip these 5. But where I'm really struggling is for loops. So let me go look in their list and find where they have their loop section and go through that. Ali, glad to hear that they are being helpful for you. And it is okay, right? There are different methods. There are different ways of thinking about it. JavaScript is JavaScript, right? There will always, a for of loop is always a for of loop. The difference is Free Code Camp may go, we're not big for of loop fans. We like the for let I equal 0 method. And so you're going to get exposure to both of them. And now as a developer, when you guys go to OpenHack next Thursday, don't quote me on that, I need to confirm that date, but you can come in and all of a sudden you can start interjecting and asking questions of other developers. Oh, are you a JavaScript developer? Out of curiosity, what's your favorite loop, right? You can start talking about those concepts and really diving into what sounds so nerdy, but can really be a great discussion around different ways of accomplishing something. Just so it's on everyone's calendars, not next Thursday, but the following Thursday is Rock on Tech. If you have not responded to the carpool information yet, go head over to Slack, check out the Rock on Tech channel, click on that carpool link and make sure that you join a car, or if you are available to take other people over, you can go ahead and add your car as well so people can ride with you. If you have any questions, any logistics things, anything that we can help with, use that Rock on Tech channel in Slack. Feel free to post anything in there. I believe most of us will be going over at like 7:30-ish that morning. And we'll figure out a place to meet. But any logistics issues, anything that's popping up for Rock on Tech, feel free to drop that in the channel. For the 10 of you who voted that you are interested in it, we have already purchased your ticket at no cost to you guys. It's fully sponsored by Hack Upstate. I think that that's going to be a really great opportunity for you guys to see kind of the world of tech and dive into it. I will also say, we jokingly call them holy events at my startup company. Anytime Apple has a product release, we make sure to take the 2 hours off for that product release, and we all like stop the work that we're doing and tune into that. So if you are curious about new tech coming down the pipeline, it is WWDC, which stands for the Worldwide Developers Conference. That is their keynote presentation is, I don't think it's tomorrow. I'm pretty sure it's Monday, 1 to 3. The conference may kick off tomorrow, but their big keynote where they're going to hopefully reveal virtual reality stuff. New MacBook, new desktop class processors.
I'm already broke.
There is a lot of cool stuff that Apple has been working on. And basically the way they do those June events is they say, hey, developers, here's what's coming down the pipeline. And oftentimes the products that they release won't be available until like a September-ish timeframe when they release the new iPhones and iPads. Not always. Apple is known for doing basically 3 releases. They either do it March, June-ish at WWDC, or September-ish for back to school. They clear out all their inventory and then they release the new products right after that. So lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline. If you are an Apple fanboy like I am, fan person, I guess is more accurate. Monday, 1 p.m. I always like live stream it with my boss on Slack, and we send messages back and forth about how excited we are, about how nerdy it is, and how the superlatives are always ridiculous because, you know, it's the best thing that they've ever built. And it's like, of course, it's the best thing. It's the newest thing, all of that fun stuff. So sorry, geeking out there just a little bit. Those are events coming down the pipeline. Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, apple.com. If you're interested in the keynote, I will promise to keep my rants about my opinions of all of that short on Monday's class and not take up too much time on that. But that's coming down the pipeline. Rock on Tech, make sure to utilize that Slack channel. Or, of course, you can always DM me in Slack if you have a question that you don't want to post publicly, and we will go from there. I think that's everything. I will get back to you next Thursday about OpenHack. I believe we'll be taking off. I just need to confirm with Mike that next Thursday is indeed OpenHack because that's the second Thursday of the month. And then JavaScript blog coming down the pipeline, our algorithms challenge, and then our JavaScript concepts review. With all of that said, did I shake loose any questions that you guys have about the code or JavaScript concepts before we dive into tonight's code? Okie doke. So do a quick refresh of where we left off. I'm going to take my day 4. I'm going to pop that open in VS Code. I'm going to drop my live share into the chat. I'm going to pop open my index and my script and put the script down in the lower half. Also going to open up my style in the lower half. We won't be working in that a ton, but there will be one thing that we need to add to it. Pop open my Go Live. All right, so where did we leave off on our project? Well, we could click on our movie and we can click on a seat and it doesn't look like it's doing anything, even though if we come over to our JavaScript just to review, we do have this on click. Out of all of these, we do have this on click event going here, right? This seat clicked. And what we did is we went in and we said, go to the movie drop down, go get the value so we can work on that movie that's selected. Then go back into the event that the target was in, get the attribute out, the row index and the col index. Where are those row and col indexes coming from? That came from when we generated out all of these seats, right? And when we generated out these seats, we were looping over the seats that got generated. Well, that gave us access to the row index and the col index. So we just slipped them in as attributes into that span. That means that when that span is clicked on, we're able to retrieve that information out from the target. So we did all of this work. We turduckened our way down into the movies selected, get the seats, get the row index, get the col index, go all the way down to the selected property or key and set that equal to true. Okay. Then we console logged out our seats and we were able to see, hey, when I click on my seat here, I am able to see that that seat got selected true. Okay. But if I change this, go to another movie and come back to this one, they turn blue. For anyone who did not get the answer by sticking around past the end of class yesterday, does anyone want to take a stab at why it's doing that?
Is it the same thing as like when a link on a website, when you click on it and it turns blue?
It's a good guess.
Like that
Not
same thing?
Not that. No. Any other guesses?
It's not updating the color.
It's not updating the color. Why? Well, it is updating the color, but only when what happens?
Yeah, only when we go back to the movie from clicking on another one.
Exactly. So here's what's happening. We're going to the on click. The seat clicked is updating the data here, but this data is sitting, living in our JavaScript. This does not cross the great divide known as the document object model. What do we use to update that document object model? We happen to use, among other methods, inner HTML. So what's happening here is when we set this to selected true, we are captured, we are entrapped in our JavaScript data. That updated in the data, but that does not mean that that data is tied to our document object model. So what ends up happening here is we have to go back through our on change. And when our movie on change runs again, no matter what movie is selected, it goes through, gets our data, then goes through all of the hassle of generating out this HTML again. So what we are doing is basically saying once the data changes, once we set selected to true, what we should be able to do is say, hey, go rerun this section of code to make it regenerate out. Well, we run into a problem though, because we could do not follow me on this, do not code along. What we theoretically could do is come in here and copy our movie data all the way down to our inner HTML. Nope. I could theoretically copy this whole function, all the code in this function, come down to my seat clicked and paste it. Do not follow along with me. When I come over here and now select a movie, then click on a seat, I get an error that I didn't think I was going to get because I may have duplicated this. Now, when I click on a seat, it's not defined. Selected movie. This is just going to be movie selected. Ignore me. La-di-da-di-da. It turns blue. And if I click on any other seat, it turns blue. Okay, so the trick is here, we have to update all of the seats. But we just broke a really big dry rule, right? We repeated ourselves. We took this entire on change and we just copied and pasted it down here. All right, yay us for working smarter, not harder, and realizing that exactly what we needed to regenerate was already written. But there's got to be a better way to be able to rerun that section of code. Anyone want to take a guess on what we need to do to be able to reuse that code in two different places?
Is it a for loop?
It's not a for loop because we're not looping over a set of data. It is not a class because the classes are really CSS based. It is a function. A couple of you guys guessed right. We need to move that into its own separate function so we can call that function in two places. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up here, and instead of saying movie drop down on change and that getting an event, what we're going to do is we are going to say, we're going to rename this and we're going to say const generate seats. What's generate seats going to do? It's going to take this event and it's going to go ahead and run all of that. What we also need to do is come down to the end. And by the way, you can now follow along again. I also need to go to the movie dropdown and say on change of that, go ahead and get the event. And what do I want you to do? I want you to generate the seats based off of that event. So we pause because whenever we are refactoring our code, it's more important to say, did we break something that is already working before we go on and test to make sure that that function is reusable in other places? So I'm going to save. I'm going to come back over to my code. Come back over to my, where did it go? My on change. And I'm going to say, all right, if I click here and pick a movie, I still get my seats. Now, if I click on one of them, nothing is changing yet. Nothing is changing yet because I haven't called this generate seats down in my seat clicked yet. But because I renamed this, I wanted to make sure that the on change, which was working before, continues to keep working. We're only generating the available seats after a selection was made with this line of code. We haven't tied the on-click event to that function yet. All right, so I'm going to come down to my seat clicked. And in my seat clicked, I'm also going to say, after you have set that selected seat, also generate my seats based off of the event that happens. And this is a time that I actually know the code is going to break before I go test it. I come over here and I change my drop down and my seats appear. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. But if I click on a seat, I immediately get an error. I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Cannot read properties of undefined reading seats. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I have no idea until I say, what's going on line 59? So I go back up to my line 59, and it is trying to get the movie data seats out. And I'm like, well, where is that movie data coming from? That's coming from 56 up here. So let's see what's going on under the hood. I'm going to console log out my movie data. I'm going to select my movie. That works fine. I pick my seat. And now all of a sudden, 57 is undefined. And I'm like, all right, well, what's going on there? You're getting the selected movies out of the movies. So we got to take a step further back in our debug, right? Let's log out our movies and make sure that's still there. I pick a movie, I click on the seat. I get all of my movie data, so that doesn't seem to be the issue. So maybe the problem is our selected movie. So I save that, I come back over here, I click on a seat, now it's undefined. But the first time this ran, it got Star Wars. Okay, well, what gives? The problem that we're running into is that when we call generate seats for the first time, what event is getting passed in? The event that's getting passed in is our on change. Our on change is pulling the movie that we have selected. But when we click on a seat, what event target is that on? It's no longer on the drop down, it's on the seat. So there's no way that we can pull out the event target value to get the selected movie when we click on the seat itself. So now we've got to refactor our code a little bit here, because this function that we thought was going to be great and be reusable in both places, turns out it can't be, because the event that we're passing into that function isn't reusable, right? When we change the dropdown, we can pull the value from there, but if we call this function from somewhere else, that target of the is not going to have the value out that we need to get the selected movie. Okay, no big deal. What we can do is we can rewrite this a little bit. Instead of saying get it from the event target value, let's change this to get it from the movie dropdown. And the movie dropdown, you'll notice we defined all the way up here by getting the element by the ID. So now I come down, I click on my movie, I get all of my seats, and if I click on one of the seats, it should turn blue. Lots of little steps in there. Take a moment, see if you can retrace your steps and understand what we needed to change, why we needed to change it.
So Max, it should turn blue like when we hit it to
Well-
like,
Correct.
yeah, I need to go back as mine isn't.
Okay. Do you want to share your screen?
Sure, I was trying to make the changes that you made. Share my code, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we generated your seats. We moved that into the right function. We changed this line right here to say, instead of getting the value from the target, instead go to the movie dropdown and get the value of it from there. So see if that
Okay.
fixes it.
Nope, when I click it, it's still not coming up. So,
Okay, do you have any errors in your console?
I'm not seeing any. You want me to drag it over?
No, let me just read through this code and see if there's anything else going on. So you've got your generate seats. You've got your generate seats. Okay, the only other thing we need to do is say, after we set this selected to true, we also want to call generate seats right here.
Okay.
See if that does it.
Yep.
Cool.
You.
No problem. So that's a good note, right? Of once we've got our generate seats here, this actually won't do anything until we tell the computer, hey, actually call that function. So what you want to do, if you're having a problem following someone else, it's because you've got them pinned. So if you come up here to the little pin icon and click on that, that should get you out of that mode. It drives me nuts that it's a read-only live share and that somehow you can like pin someone else. Yeah, if you click this pin up here for follow participant, that should unfollow you as well. Okay, so when we move this into generate seats, this function now goes into memory and goes, well, I am not going to do that until you tell me, hey, I actually want you to generate these seats. So we added this in 2 places. We added this not only in the movie on change, because we still want to generate out all of the seats. What do I mean by generate out the seats? It means I want to go through all the arrays, all of those objects, get the data out from them, and basically build my HTML to make those seats show up. So I put in generate seats there. And then I also said, hey, whenever you click on a seat, go back through, run that for loop again, generate out all of those seats and make them show up. Does anyone need help? Does anyone have it so that when they click on a chair, it is not turning blue? Can you have some fun with this? You can click on a bunch of different chairs, have them all turn blue.
I just have a question, Max. So
Yes.
mine's is showing up with the 5 rows. Do I need to go back to where we made that 5 and put it back to 8?
Totally up to you. It's your project. You do you. If you want to have 10 seats in a row and only 3 rows, that's totally fine. Doesn't really matter if you want it to look like mine. Yes, I'm using 8 and 8, but totally up to you. Yeah, Jen, I snuck that last generate seats in really slyly. So make sure you are calling your generate seats both in your seat clicked and in your movie dropdown on change.
All right, I need a little assistance now, so if nobody's ahead of me.
Go for it.
I was trying to follow what you were doing. I was getting it, and then my seats disappeared altogether, and I don't know what happened with that.
That happened. Share your screen. Let's take a look. I also don't know why my web camera all night has made me Donald Trump orange. I really am not happy about it. I swear I'm not that tan.
Yeah.
We'll fix that at some point. Okay, sorry. Let me request remote. All right, so first things first, we go to our generate seats and we moved that into its own function, which is good. We changed it to the movie dropdown. That is good. We added our generate seats to our on change. To our on change, and I think that will fix your problem.
I gotta learn to spell. There you go. All right.
You're working, you're good? Cool.
Yeah, but oh yeah, we all said. I just can't spell. That's all. I can't type.
Yeah, I broke mine too.
Okay, share your screen, take a look.
All right.
So, Rain, it's funny you mentioned that. I am actually on an island right now. My parents live at the beach. And I was literally there today, but not like sunbathing, just to walk the dog.
Oh my god, I'm so jelly.
Head back up to Syracuse tomorrow, though, or on this weekend.
Am I showing my
or-
code or no?
It started the screen share, but it's just black. So I would stop it and restart it and see if
Interesting.
that shakes it loose.
What's going on?
Oh, there it worked that time. Okay. So
Oh, wait, hold on. My bad. It told me in here, it said it was line 83.
okay.
I generate
so
seats.
let's go take a look at your code. Okay, so you're calling your generate seats properly in both places. Let me request remote. My guess is that it is not called generate seats up here. Yeah. So we
Interesting.
renamed this and we said, hey, we're going to call this generate seats and basically redirect that on change down here to call that function.
I was looking for where you had changed it at. I remember you doing that. All right, thank you.
Make sure it works before you bump
Oh,
your
yeah.
screen share.
Oh no. Oh no.
Okay, so selected movies is not defined on 54. So let's take a look at that. On 54, selected movie
Oh.
drop down.
Dude, I don't know how I did that.
Oh, down here. Okay, this
Yeah.
is supposed to say selected movie, and we'll take that out.
I think I dragged it outside of the parentheses.
That will do it. There you go. And you're clicking.
Appreciate
You're
you.
good.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else need help?
I'm probably going to need help because my live share is following someone else.
So in the top right of the live share, there's a little pin that shows up, like a little push pin. Just click on the push pin and that will unfollow you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm good to go, by the way. Everything's turning blue.
Cool. Natasha, there is a way to follow all the changes I'm making. It's called the video on YouTube. And all it takes
No,
is 3 hours of your time to review all of it.
That's all. I mean, everything changes a different color in Git, so I kind of got a little lazy with that program there, so I can see all my editing.
So you always can download it from Git and pop it open in VS Code. And that's a good way to, instead of having my
Nice.
live share, you can just
Mhm.
download the whole folder and then pop that open in whatever day that we're working on. And then the coloring will match what the coloring is during class and in your code and all of that.
You're out. Thank you.
Yep, good tip. Wow, that's nuts. Syracuse is hotter than Miami today. Yeah, sorry if I was cranky yesterday. I like had to throw open a window, and as soon as I did, I was like, oh, I'm cranky because I'm so hot. So first half of class, I needed to cool off apparently.
Max, can we just review one more time why we put the generate seats on line 103, like at the bottom after we console logged out?
103 here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Like
So
why did
what-
we need to go inside of that function?
Yeah, what we figured out basically was without this in here, what was happening was we were setting it to true. And when we set it to true, we were like, well, that should be turning the seat blue, right? Well, it was only turning the seat blue when we were coming up to this on change, changing it to a different movie, changing it back, and then all of a sudden our blue seat showed up. And we're like, all right, what's going on there? Well, what's ending up happening is our on change event was what was actually looping through all of the movie data seats, right? And generating out this HTML. And this HTML is what had the code in it to put that selected class in it and make it blue. So this code was only running when we changed the dropdown. So all the work that we did down here to set it equal to true, that was only happening on the JavaScript side of things. We also wanted to say, now go through all of that JavaScript data, go through those arrays, go through the objects, do all of that stuff, and update the inner HTML. But we had already done all of that work, right? We were like, well, when we change the dropdown, it generates all the HTML. We want to be able to reuse that part that not only generates all the HTML, but ultimately goes into the seats and updates that for us. So what we did is we moved our on change. We said, all right, hold on change. I'm going to wire you back up in a second. But because we want to be able to reuse this whole generate seats function somewhere else in our code, we're going to make this its own function called generate seats. And once that generate seats is in its own function, we can then call that in both places. We can call it when the movie dropdown changes because we still want it to generate all that HTML out. But we can also then say, after we set the selected to true, after we figure out what seat was clicked on, we can also then say, go generate out the seats another time because that data has been updated. Does that make more sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Okay. Now we get to the fun part. The hard part's over. Now we get to just make this a little bit more cleaned up, a little bit more presentable, and go from there. So one thing, and these are all little tweaks, that's bothering me is when I hover over one of these seats are supposed to be clickable. And what am I getting? I'm getting a little text highlighter. I'm getting a text highlighter because it's a span. It's technically not an image, but I want to show to the end user that that seat is clickable. So I'm going to head over to my CSS. I'm going to go to my style.css. I'm going to then go in and target my seats div span. This time I'm not going to use the pseudo selector like I used before. And I'm going to say, hey, the cursor on that is going to be a pointer. So I save, I come over here, and now I get a little pointer on it. Okay, feeling good about that. So I come in here and I go, you know what? I am selecting my seats that I want to buy, and I want this one, and this one. And then I go, you know what? I don't want to sit over here anymore. So I click on that and it stays blue. I'm like, but I don't want that seat anymore. Let me unselect it. Okay. Well, what I can do is go into my script.js, and when I do my seat clicked, instead of setting it to true, what I'm going to do is move that into its own variable. It's in the style.css, Natasha, right here, this seats div span cursor pointer. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say, let my seat equal this whole movie selected seats row index. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my seat selected to whatever the seat selected opposite is. Whoa, what's going on there? Well, I took all of this, right, and I just put it in seat so it's easier to reference. Then I'm still targeting my seat selected. And what do I want the new value of my seat selected to be? I still want it to be whatever the current value of seat selected is, but I want the opposite of that. That one exclamation point is going to say, if the seat selected is false, make it true. And if the seat selected is true, make it false. It's basically a way to toggle a Boolean. So I come over here, I select my seat, I click on it and it turns blue. I click on another one and it turns blue. And I click on that and it turns back to black. Amy Winehouse record, isn't it? Back to Black? Can't remember. Anyway.
Max,
So-
can you explain that one more time, like that last line?
Yep.
That you-
So basically, instead of having to type this whole thing in again, I'm like, that's going to be a pain. So I move it into its own variable called seat just to make it easier to reference it. And what I do is I say, hey, set this seat selected to whatever the current value of seat selected is, but flip it, use the reverse value. That's what that exclamation point is going to say. So it's going to say, hey, if the seat is selected is true, set it to false. And if the seat selected is false, then set it to true. It's basically a way that not operator, that's what the exclamation point stands for, is set it to whatever it is not. So if it's true, set it to false. If it's false, set it to true. We usually use it with Boolean operators, true, false, but there are other places that you can use it. So another place that you can use that is if you're writing an if statement, you can say if the value is this, but it's not equal to this, this, or this. That's another place you can use that not operator. But when we use it with a Boolean, it's just a quick way to say, take the false, make it true, or take the true and make it false.
I
Okay,
was
thank you.
wondering where would you use that ever? Like I did the Code Academy thing.
Yep.
I was like, where would you use that? Like, why would you use this? And then this happens.
Yep. This is a great way of saying, you could, don't follow me on this, just a little example. What you could do, just to show you that there are multiple ways of writing this code, you could say if the seat is selected, set the seat selected equal to false, else set the seat selected equal to true. Okay, that makes sense, right? The seat is currently selected, make it not selected. And if it's not selected right now, then we want to make it selected, so set it to true. So if we do this, this code will work exactly the same way, where you can click on it and you can click on it again and it goes back to black.
I was
Now
just thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, what if you make it as if or an else? What if this is selected, make it false? I was just thinking about that.
So that's the long way of writing that out. This is the short way of saying, take whatever the current value is and flip it, and then take that new value that you just flipped and put it back into where we want to store it.
So don't they both have to be variables to make this work?
No. They both have to be Booleans in
Boolean.
order to make the not operator work.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. Booleans.
Okay. Yes, yes.
I mean, selected is technically variable here, right?
Seat selected is a variable, yes, but it doesn't have to be. You could technically say, like, set it to not true, and not true is equal to false, or you could say not false, and then this is technically equal to true. But we're maybe getting in the weeds a little bit there.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. I come over here, I select my movie, all the seats show up, but it's not really realistic, is it, to think that when we go to the movie theater that no seats will be selected. There's a good chance that someone else has already come into our app, bought those seats. So we could kind of go in and set a bunch of these arrays up ourselves to say, hey, the half of the seats are occupied, set occupied to true. But I think it would be kind of cool to let the computer randomly go through and say that there's a 50% chance that that seat will already be taken. So let's do that. We are going to go back to our seat generation code. If you have your comments in your code, that's around number 8, line 118 in my code. What we did is we set all of these seats occupied false. Well, before we get fancy with a random thing, we should probably make sure that we can see when the seat is occupied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say occupied true on all of the seats. Now I come over here and I say, show me all the seats. Well, if we look in our array, it turns out our occupied true is getting set. But just like we did our selected, we have to tell the interface, we have to tell the HTML what an occupied seat looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to our generate seats method. And in here, I'm going to add another template literal. Or another, it's not technically another template literal, another variable inside my template literal. And I'm going to say, well, hey, if this col is occupied, then add the class occupied. Otherwise, don't add anything. Now I need to do one final step. Once I add in my occupied class here, I also need to add in what occupied looks like. And occupied, if I can spell it right, is going to have the color of red. So I come back over here, I select my movie, and boom, all of the seats are red. All right, we'll fix that in a second. But for now, we should be able to modify our seat generator to say, hey, all the seats are occupied true. Go back up to our HTML and modify our HTML to say, hey, if this seat happens to be occupied, set it to occupied. And then finally, what does occupied look like? It's going to have the color of red. Anyone not get red seats? You guys 1 minute to catch up.
Can I see your code? Sorry, on the GS.
Two things that we added. One, down in this for loop, we set occupied to true for all of the seats. And then we also said up in our seat generator function, we added in this piece to the template literal to set it into occupied.
Okay, call occupied. If occupied, then what was? So can you explain this real quick? What was?
Yep. If the column is occupied, then add in the class occupied.
Okay.
Otherwise, if it's not occupied, put nothing in there, make it an empty string.
Got it.
Anyone need help? Going once? Going twice?
On line 73, trying to see. Can you explain what that does again? The code dot selected question mark selected. I know that's kind of like an if statement, you know, like if.
Yep. It is an inline if statement. So we say if whatever is true before the question mark, then use whatever the text is between the question mark and the colon. And if it's not true, else use whatever is on the right side of the colon. So what we're doing here is we're saying if this column is selected, right? If this seed is selected, add in the class selected. Otherwise, don't add anything in. Then we come down here and we do the same thing. We're saying if the seat is occupied, add in the class occupied. Otherwise, don't add in anything. And we can kind of see how that's playing out because if we inspect the element, we can take a look at what the class is on the element and we can see material symbols outlined and occupied.
Cool.
Goggin, what's up?
So mine are not turning red for some reason. I think I messed up something here.
Share screen.
Maybe I think I have to put this into this, but let me see. 1 second. Right here. I think this has to go. Oh, sorry. Where the hell did I go?
I have mine on a new line just to make it more readable. I'm in request remote. So you've got your call occupied, otherwise nothing. That looks right. Then we modify our for loop to make them all occupied true. And the last thing we do is go to the the style.css. You broke it. Right. Why is that not working?
I was thinking right here. Where the hell did it occupied thing? Maybe this has to go inside here, inside of this. Right here, maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
Quote mark right outside the template literal.
oh, yep, that's probably doing it.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, but I didn't know. Did it? Oh,
Well,
everything
that's
broke.
interesting.
Maybe not.
Oh, that quote is supposed to be here.
Okay, something was missing, I guess. There
There you go. Okay, so that quote, this quote right here is closing out this quote right here. So everything that we're putting inside between here and here is all the classes that get applied to that span.
So the question mark is like or, right?
It's an inline if.
Inline if, okay.
If this first thing is true, use what is between the question mark and the colon. Otherwise, use the thing in after the colon.
So the double dots are like or.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
They're more like else than or.
Oh, else put this. Okay, if this or else. Okay, got it.
Yep, you got it. Anyone else need help?
Next.
Yep.
I have red seats, but I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong, due to the fact that when I click on my movie dropdown, I have to click on the titles a few times before the seats even appear.
I believe it's only your first title that's causing an issue because it has quotes in it. So if you refresh your page and pick any movie except the first one, it should work on the first time.
Should I move that title maybe to the third option? Will that help it?
Yeah, we would have to figure out how to get those quotes to not break everything. And I'm not really sure why that is. But if you just like remove those quotes from the title, I think you'll find that everything else will work normally.
I'm just gonna change it to kick ass or something, or Mr.
Sure.
Poopy. Okay.
Yep, that should do it. Sorry, I'm figuring out. Nope. I went too far down the Trump scale, trying to adjust my white balance. Maybe that looks a little better. Okay. So let's go ahead and so we've got all of our seats as red. And we're like, all right, maybe that's a little too extreme. Now I want only half of these seats or roughly half of these seats to turn red. How do I go about that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to where we generate out all of these seats in the first place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say math.random. Math.random, what does that do? It generates a number between 0 and 1, but it's always a decimal number, right? And what I basically want to do is say, well, if the number is below 0.5, then it's not going to be occupied, or it is going to be occupied. And if it's above 0.5, it shouldn't be occupied. So if you think about randomly, right? If all the numbers are going to be between 0 and 1, that means it could be 0.25, it could be 0.45, and if it's below 0.5, then it should show up as occupied. But there is an equal chance that the number will be above 0.5, and because of that, it would not make it set to true. So all I need to do here is say, hey, if the math.random is below a 0.5, then that seat is not going to be occupied, or it is going to be occupied. Otherwise, it's not going to be occupied. So I come back over here, I pick my option, and look at that. I've got some of my seats showing up in red. And if I choose another option, they change there. But if I go back to that same option, you'll notice the same seats are still red. So now we can't cheat the system and just change different movies. It's actually keeping track of all of that data. I think that's pretty cool. And if you want to, yeah.
So you know, like how we have a blank spot in the selection, like the drop down.
Yep.
When I click on that, why does it say type arrow?
Because it is trying to run your on change function, which is our
Drop down. Oh,
drop down on change.
okay.
It's trying to run that, and it's going into your generate seats, and it's trying to find a movie drop down, and that value doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
So we
it-
can
I
fix
like
that. The
Oh.
question that Gagan has here is when we have our console open and we pick this blank movie,
Yeah.
what's it do? It says, hey, it can't figure out what the seats are down here because the movie that we selected doesn't exist. There's no blank movie. Okay, well, we can fix that by saying if the let's do it like this. Let's come down here and say if there is not a selected movie, if the movie drop down value is blank, what do we want to do? We want to go document get element by ID seats and set this back to an empty string. Then we can come in here and say return. What that return is going to do is it's going to stop running the code. It's going to say, all right, we could put all of this code in an else, but that would be a big else, right? So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, once you're done running this, once you clear out those seats, return the function. We're done with it. We're finished. Go back to whatever was calling it. We're done. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick my movie. I get all of my seats. And then if I come back in here and pick my blank option, now I no longer get an error because there was not a selected movie. So this is our not operator showing up again, right? This is saying go get the selected movie. And if it's not a selected movie, then clear out our seats, make them be blank again, and return the function. Say don't keep running all of the code underneath this. Okay. Little bit more to go before break. Does anyone have questions so far?
So why the return is empty? I'm sorry.
The return is just stopping the function from running any of the code underneath it. We're not returning anything. We're just saying, hey, this function is done. Just be done. Return the function and say we're finished.
Oh, okay. So it's like basically clearing it, the code. Like don't
Yeah,
run
it's
it.
saying like return nothing, saying we don't need to we don't need to keep running this.
Right, let me see real quick.
If you don't like the return, you could put an else here and put all of this code in the else, and that would also work. But the return is just a quick way to say, don't run anything underneath this. We're done with
can
this
we
function.
put like can we put like else console log something else like have a good day or something? I don't know.
You could. It's very common to have an if without an else.
Okay, thank you.
Mo, what's up?
Yeah. So my seats disappeared again.
Do you have an error in your console?
No.
Okay,
I don't.
share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right.
Okay, let me request remote. And so I'm going to look at your on change first, because that's what usually kicks all of this off. So you still got your generate seats, seat clicked, generate seats, all of that's fine. We go generate seats, we get the drop down. If there's not a selected movie, we do our return. We do our inner HTML, seats HTML. Okay, I don't see anything wrong here. So can you share your browser screen with me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Wrong one. But yeah, so it should be here. You see my so
Yep. Okay, so
yeah,
the
so when I
first thing
click
I
my
noticed
seats,
is you don't even have your console open, so you wouldn't
well,
know if you had an error in
it
there.
was I had to close it and reopen it to
Oh,
see if
gotcha.
it was a leave problem.
Okay,
but yeah,
so okay, take me back to your code.
um,
Jillian beat me to, I think, finding the problem. Let me request remote. The closing quote and the template literal are outside of the arrow. So this closing quote is supposed to be in here. So this opening quote and this closing quote line up. And I know it's confusing because we have a bunch of other quotes inside of the template literal. But
Okay.
this is the closing quote for that class equals quote there. So see if that fixes it in your browser.
now they're coming back. All
Nope.
right.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, they're coming back now. Yeah,
Cool.
now they're all raised and everything now. So we're good.
Cool. Good work.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Nice work, Jillian. Beat me to it.
Oh, if I
Okay.
put, sorry, I know it's same thing, but if I put the console log else, it still gives me error, but it works though. But I don't know.
Do you have a return here?
No, I put like if and else instead of return.
Okay, so the else has to contain all of this code inside of the else.
Oh, and then
it won't give you an error.
oh, okay.
Yeah, all the way down to including line 89 of my code, all of that would have to be in the else. And so you want to be careful when you're moving code into a new block because it's another level of indentation, adds a little bit more complexity to read it, to understand it, to realize, you know, hey, this code is only running at this time, as opposed to this return, which is saying, hey, nothing underneath this is going to run.
I was just trying to mess with it. Just for fun.
Okay, so where was I going to head with this? All right, we have our seat showing up. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick my movie. I see my selected seats. Oh, that's what I wanted to do. I saw some questions about math.random in the chat. So math.random, let's see how that works. I'm just going to go down to the very bottom of my code. You don't have to follow along with me here. And I'm just going to say math.random. Okay, what's going on here? Math is a built-in function to JavaScript, right? So we don't have to import that. We don't have to install that. Math is just one of those things that JavaScript knows how to do. Good thing, because I don't hate math, but computer knows how to do math. Great. So we say math, and we call .random. There are a couple different functions built into math, and you could go into the JavaScript documentation to get that information. So there's math.round, there's math.floor, which basically drops a decimal off. There's math.average, I think. There are a couple different functions built into math. We're going to use random. But we're using a function that's built into the computer. So that's why we need to put these parentheses here. That's saying actually go run the random function. Because if we don't put these functions, you can see that it's like random is some native code that's built into JavaScript. And we're like, no, we don't want to know what the code is to make the random number. We want an actual random number to come out. So that's why we put these parentheses here to say, go run that random function. And what it returns is 0.3938, blah, 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 blah. Well, if I refresh the page, I get 0.42. And if I keep going, you'll see I get all of these random numbers between 0 and 1. So what we did is we said, hey, is math.random the result of math.random less than 0.5? And in this case, it said, no, it's not. So we know whatever number it generated was under 0.5. And if I run this again enough times, I'm going to get a true. So whatever number it generated at that point was above 0.5. So that's what we did. We kind of cheated and did 2 steps in one here. We said, hey, go generate a random number. And once that random number is generated, if it's less than 0.5, then that seat is going to be occupied. Otherwise, it's going to be above 0.5 and occupied is going to be false. So we did 2 steps in one here. Now there was a question, all right, what are these parentheses doing? That's saying actually run the code, generate a random number, instead of just saying like, here's this function where like, no, we want you to actually call the function, execute the function, run the function. And then the other thing is, why don't we have anything in here? Well, when we do our console log, we always put something in this console log part, right? Or when we call our .push function, we put something in the parameters there. Well, in this case, we don't actually need to tell random any other information. Math.random knows how to run without us giving it any input. It doesn't need any additional parameters in order to actually execute the function. So that's why we leave them blank here. We can't just leave them off completely, because otherwise it's like, well, what do you want me to do with this function? We put the parentheses there to say, we want you to actually run the function. And then it's like, great, what information do I need in order to run that function? And math.random's like, nothing. I don't need any additional information to run. And because of that, we can leave them blank. Does that answer any questions, any outstanding questions? Okay. One last thing I want to do before we go on break. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to select my movie. I get all of my random seats that are selected. And I'm like, I want to go to Star Wars and I'm the big bad developer. I want to take a seat and I go, I want to sit in the front row, and I click on, oh, that is not doing what I thought it was going to do. Okay, hold that thought. We are going to go on break now because that completely backfired on me. Be back at 7:20 from break, and we will add a couple more features and then revisit this thought. This bug is actually now even trickier to solve. We'll figure out why in 1 second. So go on break, be back at 7:20, and we will finish up the Movie Seats app. Back off. Okay, so let's see what's going on with our application. So it's nice that we can click on these seats, right? But I kind of want to know, all right, if I'm going to be buying these movie seats, right? I come in here, I pick these seats, I say, all right, I want those 2 seats. Wouldn't it be nice if we have a little thing down here that said, you've selected 2 seats and they're going to cost $18. Well, how do we know it's going to cost $18? Well, because Star Wars happens to be a $9 movie, right? And if I go on and I pick another section and I click on those seats, I would like it to say, hey, you now have 4 seats selected. And because they're $11 each, they equal up a total amount. In other words, and I have this in my finished version, if I pick 2 seats, it should say you have however many seats selected for a total. And then we have this little checkout button. We hit the checkout button, we get this little message, we hit OK. Those seats go to marked as occupied, and we are done. So that is the finish line. That's what we're going for tonight. If we make it there before 8:30, you guys are welcome to get out of here. If we get there a little early, you are welcome to go through and review it. I will go through and put comments in, kind of continuing our numbers to update all of this code. I will push that off and we will call this a finished project. We ready to dive in? Okay, so I would like to make it so that when I select one of these seats, it says how many seats I have selected. So what I'm going to do, give me 1 second. get things arranged here. Okay, so in order to keep track of how many seats are selected, I kind of need to loop through all of this over again, right? I need to say, all right, go through all the rows and then go through all the columns. And then if that column is selected, then go ahead and keep track of that, add 1 to the number of selected seats. But we've already done a ton of loops, right? We did these loops to generate the seats. We did this loop to handle the generation of the HTML. We're generating out the seat here. While we're in this loop, wouldn't it be nice if we could just reuse this loop to keep track of how many selected seats there are? Well, in fact, that's exactly what we can do. So I'm going to come up here and I am going to say, hey, when we're generating the seats, let's keep track of the num of selected, let's just say num selected seats. And how many are we going to start that at? We're going to start that at 0. Why are we making a let? Because the number of selected seats is going to increase as we're looping through all of them. Okay, that's good. Why did we put it here? Why wouldn't we just throw it in down here? Well, the answer to that has to deal with scope. Keep in mind that when this for loop is done running, any variables that we have inside this for loop that are not declared or initialized outside of the for loop are going to disappear. In other words, if I put my num selected seats in here and I said let num selected seats, when that for loop was done running, I would not have control over being able to access that variable as I was incrementing it. So I created all the way out here so that even though when these for loops are done running, I will have access to that variable outside of the loops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down in here. I'm going to add a couple new lines in my innermost for loop. And inside this for loop, I am going to say if the col is selected. If the column is selected, add 1 to the num of selected seats. So we're generating out all this HTML. We're adding a span tag for each one of them. And then we're saying check to see if that seat is selected. If the seat is selected, just bump up the number of selected seats that I have here. Okay, so I save, I come over here, I select a movie, I select my seats, and nothing happens. Like, wait a second, I've learned my lesson here. Whenever we're dealing with a JavaScript variable, like we are up here with let num selected seats, we need some place to be able to see its output. Well, the easiest place to see the output is if I come down here and just console log out the num selected seats. Now I can select 2 different seats and see that I've got 2 seats selected. And if I select more seats, I will see that number is now accurate. How do we now do something with this number to display it to the end user? How do we bridge the gap between, oh, sorry, down in the chat. It's not going to be a well, it could be a template literal, but what are we going to do with that template literal? How do we bridge the gap between JavaScript and what the end user sees? Inner HTML. Exactly. We want our JavaScript to be able to reach back into that inner HTML and display something to the end user. So that's exactly what we're going to do. But in order to do that, I need a place in my HTML to hook into so that the JavaScript has a place that it can reach into and drop something into it. So I'm going to come down underneath my div ID seats, and I'm going to make a div with an ID of selected status. Nothing's going to go in it for now. Then I'm going to go back down into my JavaScript and say, hey, instead of just console logging out num selected seats, I'm going to document get element by ID selected status. And the inside of that HTML is going to be a new template literal. So you were on the right track, Ali, of, okay, template literal, because we want some variable information to be in there. We could do it as a concatenation, but this template literal is going to let us use our $ curly braces. So we are going to say, you have selected num selected seats. And we'll say seats after it. I save, I come over here, I go to my Star Wars, I pick, and now look what I have at the bottom. You have selected 2 seats. And the kind of cool thing about this is that if I change it to Paul Blart, I have 0 selected seats. But if I go back to my Star Wars, check that out. My selected seats are staying in there. Why is that? Because we're leveraging our JavaScript object up here. Our movies is staying the same under the hood. And what we're doing is we're saying on select of that dropdown, when that movie dropdown changes, go rerun generate seats. So it's going through, it's now not only making all of the span tags for us, it is also going through and saying, hey, check to see if the seat is selected, and if it is, add 1 to this counter. Then when we get down to the bottom, whether or not this function is running because they clicked on a seat or because that dropdown changed, we're still going to display you have selected num selected seats. Okay, catching up in the chat. So HTML specs to refer to JS belong inside the body of the HTML file. Yes. So we are 95% of the time that's the case of, hey, our JavaScript's all under the hood. That's how we're making the app work. But oftentimes our app has to display something to the end user, and usually that happens using the document object model, which is that inner HTML, where that inner HTML comes from. So I'm going to push all of y'all right now. This isn't a homework assignment, but I'm going to give you 5 minutes to try it. What I would like you to do is, in my final version, you will notice that when I click on 2 seats, it says you have selected 2 seats for a total of $22. Why is it $22? Because Citizen Kane is an $11 movie. If I switch that to The Godfather and select 2 seats, it will say that it's only $16. So I'm going to push you on 2 things. 1, try and get the total to show up and be accurate. And 2, try and get those 2 numbers to show up in bold. I'll give you 5 minutes. Most of your work is going to be done all within this you have selected line right here. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I'm going to start a poll. Do not vote in this poll until you have given it a shot. 2 things that we're trying to add. 1 is this line that shows us the total. And 2, it's making the numbers that are updating show up in bold.
Max, I just have one question. So we went back to our HTML and we deleted all the span chair thingies?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we could do that because we offloaded that to our HTML or onto our JavaScript, right? Our span tag, they don't look quite the same, But for the most part, the structure is there, right? We still have the span, we still have the chair, we still have our material symbols outlined. We basically took it out of our HTML because our JavaScript was generating all of those span tags for us. And in fact, that's why when you load the page, it's blank. But when we pop open one of these, we not only see all the chairs, but we can now inspect and see all of those span tags are in there because our JavaScript is generating all of them. Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Jen, what's up?
I have an error.
Okay. Share your screen. Okay.
98 or 118.
98. So is it possible? It's usually cause selected status is spelled wrong, but you definitely have oh, you know what it is? You're missing a closing div on your seats. On line 19, you have a div ID seats, but you don't on your HTML.
Oh, Jesus.
That was a good one. You got me going for a second. And now VS Code is being annoying. Yeah. Save and see if that fixes it.
Oh, I'm gonna punch it.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
So close.
Mine is working, not working either for some reason.
Raise your hand. I got to come to Kenny first and then Gagan, I'll
sorry.
come to you next. Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, it's similar to what yeah, it's kind of doing the same thing. I'll share my screen.
Go for it.
So this is the browser. I don't know if you can see it or not, but
Okay. So same exact error message, which is fine. Let's go take a look at your VS Code.
sorry.
Fine. Always tough to juggle multiple monitors.
Yeah, I'm looking for like the stop share, and then it's over there in the third monitor.
Oh, that's the worst is when you have to Where's Waldo it.
So your code's on the left, mine's on the right. 185.
Okay. So get element by ID, selected status. You have the exact same issue that Jen has. You are missing your closing div on line 19.
19.
Of your HTML, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Line 19, you've got your div ID seats. You just need your slash div there.
interesting. Why didn't it make a closing div for me? That's weird.
Same.
Yeah, I don't know
So I
how
think
multiple of you guys had the same issue. Maybe I had a missing closing div and just fixed it without realizing it, but that should get you back on track and operational.
yeah. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, Gagan, you're up. Hopefully you don't have the same issue.
No, I fixed it.
Oh, good.
I'm missing a semicolon on the thing.
Cool. Don't forget to vote in the poll if you got it working. The goal that we're going for is that we want it to show up that when we select 2 seats, it tells us the total based off of what movie we have selected. This is the moment that Ariel affectionately calls when I yeet you out of the nest, right? You're following along. You think you're getting all this JavaScript. You think you're some hot shit. And then I ask you to add one little thing and you go, oh my God, I'm not learning anything. No, you are. Calm down. But take a step back and go, all right, how am I going to get that working, right? That text is already showing up. I need a little bit more text to show up. How do I get that text to show up? Okay, now that I'm doing that, how do I get a variable to show up in that text, right? Okay, now that I've got that to show up, what's that variable? I've got to do a calculation, something based off of the number of seats that are selected and combined in with the price of the movie. So I'm going to give you until 7:40 to struggle, to start to cry a little bit, and then I will give you the answer in 2 minutes. Mo, if you're on moviedata.price, you're on the right track with those curly braces. And we have access to the movie data right here where we're getting the price. So we just need to get to the calculation there. And I've got bad news for you. There's going to be a pushing the birdies out of the nest at the end of every week rolling forward. Just push yourself a little bit.
I got the price, but it's only going one number at the time. I don't. It's not totaling the thing. I don't know why. Oh shit. Doing something wrong.
All right. Do we want to see the answer or do you want another minute to work on it?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay.
Another minute.
Yeah, I feel like I almost have it.
Okay. I'll give you guys another minute. gonna give you until 7:45. That's 2 more minutes, and then we're gonna go through the answer. Don't have to turn this in. It's not a big deal if you can't get it working, but lots of little steps to get this working. Love the look of success, Allie. One-minute warning. All right, let's go through it. So we're in our code. And before I dive in, before I try and do too much at once, I'm going to try and break it down, right? So I'm going to look in this function, and what do we already have up here? Movie data. What is this movie data based off of? It's going to our movies object and using whatever movie is selected. That means theoretically that if I come down here, I should be able to console log out my movie data and see what's inside of it. So I save that, I come over here, I refresh, I pick my movie. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. I pick my movie, I click a seat, and what comes out? Price 9. Wait a second, that price 9 lines up with the Star Wars. If I change that to Citizen Kane and pick another seat, now I've got price 11. So I'm like, all right, I'm on the right track there. If I only want the price notation, because I'm using, I know the name of the key, I don't need dot notation. I don't need bracket notation. I need dot notation. So I'm going to log out my movie data dot price. Okay, so I get the price in there. I pick my movie. I pick a movie, and what comes out? 9. Okay, I pick another movie. I click on a seat. What comes out? 10. Okay, so I know I can access the price this way. And I want to just test to see if I can get my price to show up. So I add in the $ curly braces to my template literal syntax, right? And I'm going to just paste in my movie data.price and take out that console log that we don't need anymore. So I save that in there. I come in, I pick my Star Wars, and what do I have show up here? You have selected 0 seats 9. Okay, well, if I change that, now I get 0 seats 10. Okay, I'm on the right track. So let me add in for a total of, and then how do I calculate total? Well, I already have, the price, and I have the num selected seats. Well, how do you calculate total? You take the number of seats and you multiply it by the price of that movie. So all I need to do is say num selected seats times my price. I save, I come back over. You have 0 selected seats for a total of $0. I select 2 seats and I get my total of 16. Okay, you guys were on the right track. all I need to do is add in a little strong tag here and a closing strong tag. Because remember, what we're doing is working in our HTML. So we can use HTML elements in our JavaScript, and we can even use that right here. And our closing strong tag. And save, come over, pick one. And now we've got
Okay.
2 and 18.
CSS. Okay, so it's strong. I feel better about that.
But
No, I don't think
I was-
you knew you were on mute, but I appreciate the notes.
I was writing,
Gagan, go ahead.
I was writing a function to make like if statement. I don't know why, but I like
Yeah, I wouldn't take that approach because otherwise you would have to say if 1 seat is selected, if 2 seats is selected, if 3
Oh.
seats is selected, right? So it's better to lean into math. You don't need a ton of math as a developer, but this is a time where you can solve it with a quick little solve.
I had the movie data price, but I don't know what to do with it. But it was just doubling down everything, like everything is selected. I was like, what the? So num is like what is it like? Num we define num, no?
We define num selected seats all the way up here when we started it as 0, and then we add to it whenever the call is selected.
Okay, yeah, I know, I get it. Sorry.
Oh, good. So Quota, did I see a question or did you solve it?
I noticed that I had some errors, so I'm just gonna try to fix those real quick before.
Okay. If you need help, raise your hand. Jen, you're up.
You have an extra $sign in the opening strong before, is that supposed to be there?
Yep, because I wanted the $sign to show up here. So it's
Oh.
not actually syntax. It's actually, hey, I want the $sign to show up.
So remind me again what the strong opening quotes are for.
This is to make it bold, to make the text stronger.
Okay.
And you can use a B tag. Technically, I believe strong and B tags are deprecated, I think. So it would be better to use a span with a font weight, or to do like a span class bold and then add the bold class with the font weight in your CSS. But strong tags work for now. I'm going to keep using them. It's a very terrible piece of advice, but prefer to do it in strictly CSS, but the strong tags work. Sequota.
So I'm getting an error. It says I'm caught type error. It's saying JavaScript 99. Share my screen.
Go for it. And Corwin, raise your hand if you need help and I'll get to you in line. Okay, JavaScript 99 strong. You are, oh, no. Request. Selected status for total num selected seats, movie data price. If no movie is selected, return. You've got price on all of your movies. Okay, so the problem's got to be something down here. But movie data, selected movie. Can you bring that error from the console over? Because nothing is jumping out at me. Oh, okay. So it is cannot set properties of null setting inner HTML. So it is looking for selected status. And you have a selected status. So let's try this. Let's stop and go live. And now see if that's still an issue. Son of a biscuit. Okay, script 99, that's. Oh, you're missing, sorry, you have the same error that everyone else did. Check your HTML, everyone. If you're having an issue, make sure that you've got the closing div for your seats right above your selected status. For whatever reason, a lot of people were missing that div, and I really don't know why.
I typed in div and push enter and I thought it did the closing one too, and it didn't.
Right.
I
That
think it's
fix
HTML trolls coming in and messing with us.
Yeah, well, they're messing with all of you, which is why I'm very confused, because it's I think 3 or 4 of you have had that issue now. So you're good, Sequota, you're back up and running. Cool,
Thank-
nice work. Goggin, you're up.
Oh, just a random question. What if we make it like let's say we said if num selected seats, like into a function? Can we do that? Like,
Well, an if statement isn't a function, so be careful throwing around that term.
oh, sorry. Yeah. If statement.
You could do it as an if statement, but you would have to handle if 0 seats are selected all the way up to if 64 seats are selected.
I
So
don't know.
that's-
why I'm getting so like confused about that. I don't know. It's just clicking in my head of like the if statement.
So here's the problem. If we write it as that, don't follow along, just showing this as an example. We could say something like this. Let total equal 0.
Okay.
And if num selected seats equals 0, then your total is still going to be 0. Else if num selected seats equals 1, then the total is going to equal the then it's going to equal the movie data dot price. Else if num selected seats is equal to 2, then the total is going to equal the movie data price times 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was thinking.
Now we're going to go times 3, times 4, times 5, but we don't need an if there. The equation is always going to be movie data price times however many seats are selected. So we don't need an if to handle all 64 cases of how many seats could be selected, because for all 64 times, no matter if 0 seats are selected or 64 seats are selected, the equation will always be num selected times the price. Because there is never a different scenario that we need to handle for that calculation, we don't need the if statement.
Yeah, I get the point of view. Like that's smart way to do it. But for some reason it was just coming up like oh if. So that's I just wanted to clear it up. Thank you.
Yep. Now you could say, all right, well, people are only able to buy 10 seats at once. So if the num seat selected is greater than 10, put up a message that says you can only buy 10 seats at a time. That would be a good use of an if statement, but not in this case for the total alone.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Corwin, you're up.
I forgot I had my hand up, Keeper.
Did you fix your problem or do you still need help? I'm going to take you being on mute as an assumption that you fixed it on your own.
My bad. My computer kept lagging out for us. I'm gonna share my screen. So
Go
I
for
got
it.
it. I got it running, right? Well, like my what was I about to show you? When was that? So it just says I have 0 seats selected.
Okay.
And
So
for
there's
some reason-
got to be something wrong with our counter. So let's go to your JavaScript and let's take a look.
I'm just gonna drag it over here. Did it show up?
No, you got to switch your screen share.
I was trying to be.
Okay, so what we did, let me request remote. You are missing a little, I think you're missing, yeah, a little snippet of code that we put in here that says if the col that we're on is selected, then add 1 to our num selected seats. See if that fixes it for you.
Let's see. It shows the number of seats that I have selected, but it doesn't update the total anymore.
Okay, so that is num selected seats, and then for a total of movie data dot price times the num of selected seats we have.
Let's see. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good to go. No problem. Plush, what's up?
I had to step away from my desk, so just checking. When I'm clicking on a red seat, that's also counting towards this, the amount.
That is our next bug we are going to fix.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Anyone not get it to work, or does anyone not understand our solution? Okay. We are in the home stretch. I'm like, we are feeling good about our movies. I can select a movie. I can pick off these 2 seats that I want. It's giving me the total, and I'm feeling so good. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to click on this red seat. And now all of a sudden I have 3 seats. And I'm like, mother frecker, that seat is already taken. All right. Well, what I should probably do is, I think I just clicked on a button that I don't know. Okay. What I should probably do is say, hey, when a seat is clicked, once we get that seat, we should check to see if that seat is occupied. And if it is, alert, say, get your own damn seat. This one is taken. And then we don't want it to change to seat selected. We don't want it to console log out, and we don't want it to generate the seats again. So what we're going to do is we have 2 options. We can either put this in an else statement. Careful guys on clicking on the buttons up at the top here, because that can make everyone else in the live share follow you by accident. So if you are following Kenny again, just click on this little unpin, and that should get you off of that. So we can take this and put all of this in the else statement, or if you don't like this else statement approach, you could just put in the word return here, and that will prevent the function from running this stuff down here. So I come back over here, I pick my movie, I pick 2 seats here, and I pick a red seat. And what do I get? I get my little error message, I hit OK, and now my seats are not changing colors. I am going to look up to see if there's a way to disable the follow participant, because that's super annoying.
So just a quick question, Max. So it's either we do the if statement and put the return, or we do the if and the else and take out the return.
Correct. You can leave the return in either way, but if you put this in an else, the return isn't necessary because it's the end of the function anyway. And Doug said it well. When the function hits return, no other code in the function gets run. So now I can pick on any of my occupied seats. It doesn't affect my total. Okay. Any questions on that? Anyone not get their red seat working?
think it broke my code somehow.
Okay, share your screen.
Yeah, I don't know why everything's yellow too. On your words, like everything's highlighted yellow. I don't.
Okay, so click the pin in the top right of that pane, and that will unfollow me. And then, oh,
Yeah, that's what I tried doing, but everything is highlighted yellow. I don't know why.
if I highlight and then let go, does it? No, I have got no idea why that's highlighted.
Yeah, it's only like a certain block of code too.
Does anyone else see that highlighted on their live share?
Yeah, it's from like line 25.
Yeah, I do too. I see it in mine too.
From line 25 and below, but everything else before that is not highlighted, so I don't know why.
Let me request, because I just like highlighted a section of that, and then can you give me a remote? If you click your, yeah, but see, clicking the pin, it also isn't making it go away. That's really annoying. Okay, because it's the end of class, I don't know why it's doing that. I'm gonna have to play around with that and get back to you on that problem, but let's focus on your code. Do you have an error message in your console?
No. Just
Okay, and it's your seats just aren't showing up.
yeah, once we put in that if else statement about the seat occupied, alert and everything, just kind of
Seats, movie selected. Okay, I don't see anything wrong there. So let's can you bring your browser over to this monitor?
yeah, give me one sec. To bring the browser to the monitor, you said?
Yep. Just so we can see what's going on in the browser. Or share that screen. That either is fine. Okay, so the request remote again. Okay, so I'm gonna clear out the console just so that's clear. I'm gonna click on a seat, and so it's running your on click. And then if I click on a taken seat, so that one is running. It's just a matter of it not getting it set to selected. So can you take me back to your code? Okay, seat clicked. Let the seat, if the seat is occupied, then set it, and then generate seats. I don't see anything wrong there. Let's look at your generate seats. Give me a remote if you don't mind. And let's take a look up here. You're generating your seats, num selected. Got your selected, occupied. You've got your selected and your occupied. I don't see anything wrong with that. Call selected, num seats plus, selected status, num seats.
Yeah, that's really weird. Well, let me test something out. Because when I didn't put that in, everything was working before then. Yeah, because everything was working before then. But once I put that if statement, like uncommented it.
Oh, you know what? Let's look at, I've got an idea. Let me go back to your code for a second. I'm going to put this back in. Let me look at where you generate all your seats. Occupied math random 0.5. No, even that's right. Movie data seats, push the row. Oh, here's your problem. when we took all of this, we moved it into the else statement, but you left this down here. So we took all of this and moved it into the else, and you just didn't delete it. So what it was actually doing was setting it to whatever the opposite of it was. And then it was coming down here and like, oh, you want me to set it to the opposite of the opposite. And so it was running the same code twice. So it was setting it as occupied or selected, and then it was setting it to the opposite of whatever you just set it to. So if we take that out now, you should be back in shape, in good shape.
Yeah, I'm good now.
Cool.
I thought I was losing my mind. I was about to say, what?
Oh, unfortunately, the code is always right, and we are the ones that are wrong, and that is a tough lesson to learn. Okay, let's pull this over the finish line. We are so close. All I want to do, and this will be a good wrap-up summary, is make it so that when I click the checkout button, it goes through and it makes all of my seats get marked as occupied because I'm officially buying those seats, and make them not mark as selected. So, good review of everything we just accomplished. First things first, I need to put in a button, and that button is going to say checkout. I'm going to make sure that shows up at the right spot. I've got my checkout button. That's good. I'm then going to say, hey, when I click on this button, I want you to go run the checkout function. Okay, we made the checkout function. Now, what are we doing with it? I'm going to go all the way down to the very bottom of my JavaScript, and I'm going to say const checkout equals an event. What do we want to happen when we hit the checkout button? I want to get the movie data by going to the movies and using my movie dropdown dot value. Okay. And once I have that movie data, what do I want to do? I want to go for each one of the rows of my movie data dot seats. Loop through, get every row of the seats. And to check if this is working, I'm going to console log out my row. Because I wrote a lot of code there. My movie data could not be working. My dropdown could be giving me the wrong piece of information. Lots could go wrong here. So I'm going to select the movie. I'm going to hit the checkout button. And in my console, I get all 8 rows of 8 seats each. So I'm like, okay, on the right track here. Instead of console logging out the row, I'm going to I'm going to loop over each seat of the row. And I'm going to console.log my seat. I come in here, I pick my movie, I hit checkout, and now I get 64 things logged out of whether or not the seat is occupied or if the seat is selected. Okay, so now I'm going to say if the seat is selected, then no longer meet the seat selected, make that false, but make the seat occupied instead. I save, I come over here, I pick my 2 movies, I hit checkout, and nothing happens. What is one lesson that you have learned from this project? Why is this not working? And that lesson better not be that you hate JavaScript, Jen. What did we do? We're updating our data, but what did we learn about our data? We aren't updating the HTML. This is all working, but we have to put it back in our HTML. And we already did all of this work, but we don't want to do this work for every one of the seats. And we don't want to do this work for every row that we have in the movie theater. We want to wait until this for loop is done running. We want to wait until all 64 seats have been processed. And once they finally have, all we have to do is call the generate seats function. I save, I come over here, I pick Star Wars, I pick my 2 seats, I hit checkout. Those seats are red. My total has reset, and I am done with this motherfucking project.
Max,
Yes.
so for the alert that usually will pop up, this, would say like if this was a real thing, then it would compute your total when you hit checkout. Do I need to create an alert?
You don't, it's up to you. If you want one, you can say, this is where we'd ask for your credit card, but as a prototype,
But this is only a simulation or something like that, yeah.
we've marked your seats as occupied for you.
Okay.
If you want that alert, you can. That's a nice little thing because some people are like, wait, what happened to my seats? My seats were just taken. So if you want to just explain to them, this is where we would take you on to the payment plan or the payment page, or your seats are now reserved for you or something like that. That is totally fine.
Okay.
So come here, I get my 2 seats. I hit checkout. It says this is the checkout alert. You hit OK, and they're taken. They're marked as occupied. You are good to go. Palash, did you answer your own question?
No, actually, out of curiosity, so every time we run the generate seats function, and we run it like 3 times throughout the code. So every time we run it, it adds a row of span, a grid of span elements to the HTML. So for like running it 3 different times, does that mean it like goes into the HTML and overwrites them, or do they still exit like overlap in each other?
Overwrites them. Man, wouldn't it be nice if there was a framework that would let us like update the data and it would automatically react to those changes?
All right.
Spoiler alert.
Thank you.
Yeah, I used React for a solid like 3 months. And then someone said like, oh, so you update your data and it just reacts to those changes. And I was like, how did I not figure that out sooner? All right, this is all I've got for you guys. I am going to stick around for the next 15 minutes if any of you would like to use this time to go through and understand let's get our grand total, 185 lines of JavaScript, only 24 lines of HTML. And I would like you to think back to this and think, I never thought that this entire app would only be 24 lines of HTML. And yet here we are. We've moved all of our heavy lifting into our JavaScript. Yes, this JavaScript is complicated. Yes, we have for loops and for loops. Yes, we had to load data into our HTML to get it back into our JavaScript so we could update the HTML. We're doing a lot of work here. I will add in the comments so you can go through step by step and see everything, but take a minute, pat yourself on the back here and go, I just made an app that I could actually see a movie theater using. It's pretty cool. And out of all of that, we only got to 229 lines of code. 400, I was a little ambitious with that original estimate, but you can see how software is never complete, because you may have an itch here and go, you know what? This is cool and all, but this page is really ugly. I want to put it in a background. I want to put in some styling. I want to add in some margin. That's great. I hate CSS. That doesn't mean you need to. That's cool. Go ahead, load it up, right? You may be looking at this and be like, all right, this is cool, but maybe I want to figure out like a credit card form that I need to add to this. And maybe I want that HTML. That's cool. You could add to it that way, right? This is a portfolio ready piece, but that does not mean that you need to be done with it. You may be looking at this and go, you know, it would be cool if I could maybe write some algorithm where I would say, select best seats for me and be able to type in the number of seats I'm looking for. And it would go in and figure out where the best 3 seats are. And it would prioritize, hey, everyone hates the first row. No one wants to sit that close to the screen. Hey, the back rows aren't great either, but maybe those middle rows, they're taken. So maybe I write some algorithm that finds the best seats for me. That is a great way to really push your JavaScript. You might not be able to do that on your own now, but think that through. Think about how you'd engineer that, right? That is a great way to think about, all right, I want some additional functionality. I want to push my JavaScript. Maybe I add that in, right? All kinds of really cool things that you could do with this project, but pat yourselves on the back, celebrate the equivalent Careers in Code Friday. Last class, you made it through 3 days of working on this project. The good news is the projects don't get any longer than this. We tried to keep our projects limited down to 3 days. The bad news is we are going to start building projects that just won't die. We'll work on them for a couple of days. We'll apply all those concepts. We'll let it be. And JavaScript blog is the first one of those where we completely build this project. We think it is dead and gone. We think we've moved on. And all of a sudden, here comes back the blog, and we're adding in more features, figuring out how to use a database, figuring out how to integrate an API into our blog. We get to the point where that snowball just starts building on each other. The good news is Movie Seats is not one of those projects. This is truly finished. So over the weekend, take time, make sure you understand this, maybe even delete out all of my comments, or maybe delete out the content of my comments and leave just the numbers there and see if you can generate your own comments. That is getting you to the see one, do one, teach one level. You've seen me do it. You've done it yourself because you followed along in class. Now, can you teach one? Can you teach this code through comments to someone else? Can you explain how all 9 hours of class over the past 3 days, what did we do? What is that code accomplishing? That's the level that I want you guys to get to. So no homework in Canvas this week, nothing that you have to turn in, except the week 8 quiz, which is now officially live and is due on Sunday. Mostly multiple choice questions, shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to go through. But use that extra time this weekend to say, hey, what's it going to take for me to understand this massive, massive project, all 229 lines of code? That's where I want you guys to get to. I will stick around for the next 9 minutes if there are any questions. Otherwise, have a fantastic weekend. Don't sweat it out too much. I think the temperatures are finally going to drop, and I will see you guys all on Monday.
Max, I swear to you, I looked through the code, so I did not have to bug you on your lovely island Thursday, but something went wrong. I think I made a mistake and deleted like something, and I just cannot find it.
Okay, Sherry's going to take a look.
Okay.
You guys don't feel obligated to stick around, but you're welcome
please
to if
don't.
you would like.
All right, let's get to it. So, can you see my code?
Yep. First thing I notice is where the red squigglies are, and the red squigglies are by our alert. There are 2 things that we have wrong. One is we need quotes here because those aren't variables, right? We want that text to show up. And 2, when do we want this to show up? We want it to show up in the alert after the alert checkout is done. So I don't know if that's your problem or not. Try it in the browser and see what's going on.
Okay, let's take a look. I think it is because I made sure everything else prior to that was good to go. Yep, that was the problem. Yeah.
Cool. You want to test all the way through just to make sure?
Yeah, sure. Rock lobster. Beautiful. Have a good day.
And hit OK on that, and it should turn the seats red, and it's not. So I think the only thing you're missing, take me back to your code if you don't mind. is after this, what we did to check out is we said, hey, if the seat is occupied, then, nope, I'm sorry. If the seat is selected, then set the seat selected to false and set it to occupied instead. And then after we do that work and we've looped through all of the seats, generate the seats using the function we already wrote. And now you should be all caught up and good to go.
Beautiful.
And you're all set.
Yeah.
Good work. Any other questions for this evening? Amberlynn, what's going on?
What's the date of the next capstone check-in?
It is after our summer break, so you have a couple weeks left. It is July 10th.
Okay, thanks.
And I will remind you guys before summer break of what expectations are for that. This is kind of a tough check-in because it's like you want to have almost all of your HTML done at this point, because once we get into React, there will be a bunch of things in React where you're like, oh, I know how to use that in my capstone, and you want to like immediately implement it there. So this is a tough check-in because it's like you want to have most of it done, but you don't know enough yet to like do anything in the database or do any API calls or stuff like that. So this is the last check-in where you have a little bit of wiggle room, and then after that it becomes much easier to like know exactly what you need to get done for the next check-in, if that makes sense at all. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Have a good night, everyone.
Night.
Have a good weekend.